cracking the TOEFL IBT access to the females, while the loser walks away. Some people believe that the loser realizes that his offspring will be weaker, so the defeated stag allows the winner to mate to ensure the survival of the stag species. This couldn't be further from the truth. The defeated stag wants to mate just as much as the winner does. The only problem is that he doesn't want to risk his life for the chance to mate. The stag is better off looking for other females to mate with. Thus, both stags, the winner and the loser, are acting not for the good of the species but for their own selfish reasons. Another good example of this is a recent study on the behavior of crickets. Scientists noted that crickets occasionally band together, traveling in huge swarms from location to location. The easy assumption was that the crickets believed in strength in numbers. But a researcher showed this is not the case. He attached tags to a sampling of crickets. Some of the tagged crickets were allowed to travel with the group, but some of them were separated from the rest. All the crickets that were separated were eaten by birds or rodents, whereas the tagged crickets in the group survived. Apparently, there is safety in numbers, but the crickets aren't looking to help their fellow travelers. They want to avoid being eaten, and what better way is there than to disappear into a group of thousands of other tasty morsels? Summarize the points in the professor's lecture, and explain how the points cast doubt on the reading. 4. Core concept. Speaking 125 sample responses to drill number 2. See how your responses compare to the suggested answers below. When you review the answers, read them aloud for more practice speaking. 1. Real-world experience is usually better than time spent in a classroom. I believe this because experience is the best teacher. One example of a way in which real-world experience is valuable is that students studying auto mechanics cannot just read about an engine. Instead, they have to practice taking that engine apart piece by piece and then put it back together. Only then will students understand the concept. A second example of a way in which real-world experience is valuable can be applied to learning a foreign language. If students in a classroom never have a chance to practice the language, they may forget the skills they were taught. In this instance, it would also be helpful to practice their skills in a real-world environment. 2. I believe that Mikhail Gorbachev is both an influential person and a positive role model. One reason Mikhail Gorbachev is a role model is because he is willing to work for change. Many people are content to have things stay the same, but he worked hard to change the communist system. Even though his reforms were not as helpful as he would have liked, his willingness for change makes him a good role model. Another reason that Mikhail Gorbachev is a positive role model is because of his devotion to ideals that are larger than himself. For instance, he reached out to Ronald Reagan when he wanted to end the Cold War, instead of just following in the footsteps of Soviet leaders who came before him. Ensuring the future success of the Soviet Union was more important than simply concentrating on his Perunai power. 3. I would support mandatory classes for freshmen instead of allowing the students to pick whatever classes they want. First, this will ensure a certain quality of education. With standardized classes, universities can make sure that all of their students are familiar with important intellectual works. That way, all students will have a basic educational level. Moreover, required classes will serve to increase the camaraderie of students. Universities are good places for students to meet each other and make connections that will help them later in life. Freshmen can sometimes have difficulty fitting in, so required classes will help them make friends. 4. I agree that the most important education happens when one is a child. One reason why I agree with this statement is that younger children are very open to ideas and perceptions. A young child is very impressionable, so the lessons learned at this age can have a great impact. Furthermore, childhood is a time when education focuses on the essentials of our society. Although children may not be learning advanced skills, they are learning basic life lessons. At this age, children learn important lessons, such as the difference between right and wrong and how to treat other people. 126 Cracking the TOEFL IBT 5. The point made in the professor's lecture casts doubt on the reading. The first point the professor makes that casts doubt on the reading is his point about the behavior of stags. For example, some people interpret the stag's action as being for the good of the species, but the professor shows that the stag is actually acting in self-interest. Likewise, the professor talks about how crickets act only in self-interest, which does not support the example in the reading. The second point the professor makes that casts doubt on the reading is his point about the intelligence of animals and insects. He states that it would require a lot of intelligence for an animal or insect to evaluate how its behavior will affect an entire species.